Welcome back to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people where we talk about critical issues in the blindness community. I'm Aaron Richmond. Tonight's episode, like all others, is copywritten by me, Aaron Richmond, and Aaron's Opinion. Thank you. This podcast, like many others, can be heard on iTunes along with YouTube, where many of you really enjoy watching us. And consider following us on Twitter, Facebook, comment below on YouTube, and even consider becoming a patron on my Patreon page. We would appreciate the support. So, as a podcaster, it's really important to tweet every every episode or to tweet out every once in a while. And I'm glad I did because you guys out there are seeing it, especially David Trujillo on the other side of the camera here. You are also a podcaster, and why don't you get started before we really dive into the philosophical matter that I want to talk about? Why don't you get started by telling us, number one, how you got into podcasting and how we got from A to Z, and how you found me in the first place? Go right ahead.
Um, well, my name is David. I was just, I don't know, man. It was interesting. I've never thought I will do podcast, but it was recommended by a friend um, right before COVID happened, or no, right after COVID happened in the first month. People were talking a lot about everything that was happening, and I went there and we had conversations, and she suggested that probably I should get into podcasting and talk about the things that I talk and like to talk. So I thought it was interesting. Like I told you before, I I work a lot in the computer, so I listen to a lot of podcasts and like to learn a lot. And, uh, and I thought there were certain things missing. So, probably I thought I could pitch in. So I started little by little, and I just started not too long ago. So let's see how it goes.
I appreciate that. And it's funny you say it that way because it's basically how I got into this too. I mean, I've been podcasting for over a year, but I got into it because I felt that there were not enough strong podcasts for the blind and the disability community, where someone like you, who's just starting out their journey, can just come up to me and say, "Hey, Aaron, can I come onto your show and talk about ABC?" I think that a lot of podcasts, in my opinion, just don't always give the impression of being open. But I want this podcast to be as open as possible, where people can have the confidence knowing that if they contact me, I'm 99% sure going to say, yes, you can come onto my show and talk about a specific topic. So, by the way, tell our audience, what is the podcast called?
It's called the Noble Path podcast.
Noble Path podcast. Excellent. So far, you have uploaded one very good video. And this video is so good, it's going to be my first question to you. So you're very interested in philosophy, and you provided a beautiful voiceover for the video. Let me ask the question this way. So are we living in a cave today? What do you think?
I believe that's an eternal principle. Yes, indeed. Some people are, some people are not. Uh, right. I think that's the reason why I chose to start with that video, because, even when you start into philosophy 101, that's one of the first things that you learn about, right? Um, and I feel that story resonates a lot with me. So I will say that yes, still after all this time, a lot of things haven't changed.
Okay. All right. And so you seem like you're very interested in philosophy. My academic background, as I was telling you over the phone earlier, is in the field of international relations. Now, I did not take any philosophy classes, but I appreciate the field, and I'm certainly interested in your perception of what is going on this year. I'm sure that a lot of philosophers have a lot to say. So what has been going on? Well, my I guess my first question to you, David, is so number one, are you studying philosophy? Are you a professor of philosophy? What is your connection to philosophy?
Life, I think.
Okay, that is true, but I mean, do you have a degree in philosophy?
No, I actually am a college dropout. Uh,
That's a that's welcome. That's all right. Um, that's nothing. You know what? Let me just tell you a little secret. I'm not convinced that graduating from college is is a necessity, and I'm not convinced that it is the determining factor of your success.
oh
And
yeah.
the fact that you created a video that I liked that made me want to think and made me want to talk to you even more shows me that, I would never have worried about that one way or the other. And actually, you must be a really strong person because you're on some stranger's podcast that you don't even know and you admitted that. So I I I thank you for that. It's you're a very strong, you're a very successful person then. If you had the strength to say that so quickly. Most people would kind of allude to it gently, but I appreciate that. No worries. And I'll tell you, I completed my degree. I did graduate from a university, but I, looking back on it, I had very little interest in university myself. And I still don't know exactly why I did that. But but my parents insisted that I go to university. So probably if I hadn't, I wouldn't have had the chances that I had, and we wouldn't be here. Blah blah blah. So that is nothing to be ashamed of. Yes.
Oh no, it's just something that really wasn't for me. I couldn't.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. And you
I
know
learned.
what? And I appreciate that because I think just in general, nothing personal about you, but I do think that many people go to university who really don't need to. There are many things that are done in society that don't require university. So that is fine.
Yeah, but I mean,
What university were you going to? I'm just curious. What university?
well, I went to several schools. I went to. I started by going to the Academy of Art University at San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go for industrial design. I was very big into design, and uh, I really wanted to design sports cars.
Okay.
Ferraris and Lamborghinis. I had a big passion for them. But then, as I was getting better and I really wanted to be the best designer, I entered into deeper into subjects like mathematics and aesthetics, history, a lot of stuff. So I started feeling short, and I looked for something more challenging when it came to design. And actually, this is one of the routes that took me to philosophy, because it took me to in design school, especially in the Academy of Art in San Francisco. They blast you with a lot of design courses and philosophy of how to design things, right? And one of the persons that you read a lot about is Steve Jobs, of course. and uh, and I got very interested into software. I've always have had a knack for computers, and I really like them a lot. And as I was learning more about how Steve Jobs pushed for a lot of to get a lot of creative process, it got me into realizing that probably I would like to do software more, because we already had a lot of cars and beautiful cars, and uh, software was very powerful. It is very powerful, right? So that's why I realized that software and computers were probably my highest calling, and to get more of a grasp of software and computers, I had to go back all to philosophy, right? Um, and that's where it all started. Philosophy, it's one of my biggest passions for sure.
All right. And now, how are you spending your time at the moment? When you are not, creating videos. I mean, you created a trailer and then you created that video. So when you aren't thinking of your next video, what are you? How else do you spend your time?
Well, I'm at the moment I'm building a company with a friend, um, and companies around it to kind of create an ecosystem. So the podcast,
Hmm.
like a hobby,
Hmm.
something to express. I sometimes I need to flush a lot of ideas and
Yeah.
a lot of things that I entertain myself with. So I, in my spare time, that's what I do. But mainly, I want to end up in the technology sector.
You
Um,
know, there's a reason. Funny you bring it up. There's a reason for everything in the world. Do you know that after we complete this episode, I will add you to a WhatsApp group that you're welcome to join. It's a private WhatsApp group for all of the guests and all of the people who have helped me in podcasting. It's at least 30 people from all over the world. We have people from Nepal, Uganda, Europe, Jamaica, Canada, everywhere, Middle East. And there is a particular person in the group who also is working on developing a product, is also building a certain technology. And this technology will help blind people all over the world. How
cool.
do you, is that something that interests you?
For sure. I mean, that's why I got into this too. To have interesting conversations with interesting people and.
Oh, yeah, I am so glad you came. I will make sure to point him out to you in the group, in the WhatsApp group, who to talk to. But you will find your niche. I think that this is going to be really, really good for you. Well, that's really fascinating. So if you could develop, so what area of technology or software do you want to develop? What is your niche? Or really, the philosophical question is, what shortcut are you going to give me? If I'm a customer, what shortcut are you going to give me in the world?
Oh, um, it's a little bit complex.
It's all right.
So
Give it a shot, and let's work through the idea and see how it goes.
I'm into complex systems. I'm a big fan of all these new technologies, right? Cryptocurrency, these whole new, oh, well, not that new, systems thinking.
Okay.
Uh,
So maybe digital learning. Okay. Well, let's back up. Oh boy, I love talking about this stuff with anyone who will listen to me. So if you'll listen to me talk about it, I'm gonna love talking about this. Okay. So now for our audience are, most, I know that you're sighted and I happen to be blind, right? But most of our audience are blind people. So can you back up and maybe define some of the terms? So what is a complex system? Let's start there.
um, well, just a lot of little parts, highly interrelated and interconnected, highly
Good.
dynamic.
Excellent. A lot of really important parts that work together in the technology or in the software to produce a product, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It not,
Good.
doesn't necessarily have to be a software. We actually got that a lot from ecosystems, right?
Okay. Now, what is cryptocurrency for the audience? I know what it is. And um, to solve your curiosity, I do not own any cryptocurrency. Sorry to disappoint you. You were just about to ask, have you ever bought anything? Nope. Okay, next question. So, what is cryptocurrency, and what is your philosophy about the crypto economy?
It's the next big thing. Um, it just the best innovation uh, or the biggest innovation after um, the double entry bookkeeping, right? Now with cryptocurrency, you have a third ledger, and that is going to allow us to be able um, to accommodate currencies very differently from how we do it nowadays. Right now, we don't need institutions to control currencies and keep actually manage them. Right, which that's where we started with like management systems.
Right, right.
So it's just basically the same thing like your national currency, but this one is a virtual one where you can utilize it, and it's very safe. It's still a very new technology, a lot of things to get down. I think the best company right now that is working on that, it's Ethereum, right? The most innovative. But I really think that's the next tool that we need to adopt into our civilization to transcend most of our problems, or some of our problems. I don't want to say most.
You also took some classes in marketing, to say the words, to say the word civilization and transcend. That's a good vocab to use.
Right.
That is true. That is true. That is true. So currently, in the end, most of the currency in the world, as far as I'm aware, okay, and I am not an expert,
Yeah.
but I was under the impression that most of the currency in the end is really controlled by large banks, which in my country, in my area of the world, North America, let's just say, in the North American area of the world, the banks, control the currency in the ultimately the bank sees what's going on. And really there are federal agencies in my country that regulate that. So in the end, the government regulates the currency. Now, in the field of international relations, right, we have this concept of non-state actors, and they could be criminal organizations, they could be random people living in their mommy's basements, they could be terrorists, they could be just weird people all over the world. So how do we keep these bad non-state actors away from cryptocurrency? Basically, how does that work? How does the security work of cryptocurrency?
Uh, well, that's a big issue, It's just uh, as far as I know, because I'm not an expert either, but I like to read a lot about it. Um, but as far as I know, that has been a big problem at the beginning. I think now it's easier to track. I really don't know the technicalities, but now it's easier to track.
Okay. I'm just curious. Okay, let's say
I will say
how
that.
how does it well let me ask just to create a parallel. Let's say that you own a let's say that you own a coffee shop, and let's say that you David own an online coffee shop, David's Coffee, let's say. And let's say Aaron's Opinion wants to buy boxes of coffee for his office, right? And I want to buy them using cryptocurrency, let's say. So if I pay for my coffee, if I buy your coffee using a cryptocurrency, number one, how does the currency know that it belongs to me? And then how do they know it goes to you, right? How do they actually know?
Oh, well, that's the beauty of the system of cryptocurrency, right? That it has the third ledger, which is consensus. You have a lot of computers in a network that keeps the management of the ledger. And as you do a transaction, it shoots off to a group of computers that resolve certain mathematical equations, and they go after your timestamps, or where that currency has been used, and approves that it's um, valid, and it just transfers the money, right? Or
And what in this third ledger, the third ledger of, as you explained it, yeah, how do like what does that look like on the screen? Like, is it like would it show people's names? Is it a number?
no, usually it's a number. I've never really have used the user interfaces. You have either, when you go into Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, you can either mine uh, and you can buy computers and participate into keeping the records. And that's how you can get rewarded, by putting some effort in solving all these, processing all this information. Um, so that would be the third ledger. So usually you will have in blockchain, you'll have them record by hexadecimal codes, as far as I know.
Right. No, okay. So now I do understand. Um, I was wondering. I mean, obviously you don't have a simulated. You don't have like a simulated example that you could show us on your screen of it. I mean, I'm just purely curious. But at any rate, so then if you're like two people though, like how do you know? I guess how do you know what each other's code things are going to be? Like how does a person manage this? Is what I'm getting at here. How can people overcome this technology, this security barrier? Is what I'm wondering.
Oh, well, I think that's one of the main issues, right? That needs to get solved, and whoever solves them gets a big prize. Um, but that has a lot to do with electronic wallets, as far as,
Right.
right? And the thing with this is that, you know, it's a piece of information. So if you lose that piece of information, you cannot get it back. And since, well, it depends on the cryptocurrency that you use, of course.
Yeah.
With Bitcoin, you don't have a, you know, headquarters to call and say like, hey, you know, I lost my money, can you give it back? Or
Right. And you can the thing with BTC is you cannot reverse. It's not like PayPal where you can reverse a transaction. You can't reverse something on the chain. Once it's done, right?
yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. See
So
that in itself is a problem too because you know, I'll tell you a cute story, a true story. Funny and cute PayPal thing. Well, one night, long time ago, I was getting no, and this really happened, right? So I was getting ready for bed and I was checking my emails, and then all of a sudden I get a PayPal, message. Okay, thank you for your purchase. Purchase. I didn't buy anything. I'm getting ready for bed. So I opened the email, and the products are like a bunch of women's shoes and women's clothing.
yeah,
And let me just solve your curiosity. No, I'm not a cross dresser, and no, I don't buy women's clothing, and no, I don't have a girlfriend to buy women's shoes for.
yeah,
So, like, what the heck, right? So, I sent in a ticket, and it all got resolved. All the money got it got reversed. The transaction reversed, and the money flew around in a circle until the person had their money, and then they gave me back the $72 or whatever it was that disappeared accidentally. It was an honest mistake. Just it was a computer glitch from the handles, the usernames, right? Well, I teach English as a second language, by the way, online. And one day I was working with a student, and I told the whole story, and the student has to ask the question, well, if the person bought the shoes, then what happened? Did they ever get the shoes? I'm glad you got the money, but what about the shoes? I said, no, I don't know whatever happened to the shoes, but I didn't need women's shoes. So
that's them.
that that's it's a cute story, and it's funny and it's true, but that's the type of thing where you would need to be able to reverse a transaction. Like, what if that happened on the blockchain? Then what? Then I get women's shoes and the person doesn't get their women's shoes? Like
Yeah, I mean, but that's the different thing, you know. It's well, the whole thing that made cryptocurrency, especially with Bitcoin, right, was how the technology was built, and just having the consensus of many computers approving the same formula. Then that's what makes it very difficult to hack, right?
mm-hmm.
Usually the easiest way to steal like Bitcoin or to have a leech of that style is if someone hacks your computer or your phone, wherever you have that piece of information, you know. Like I've heard about stories where they have, you know, they probably put like 5,000 Bitcoins when they're cheaper in a hard drive, and then now that turned into millions of dollars, and now, you know, they forgot the password into the hard drive and now they couldn't get it.
See, this is, I mean, it's laughable on a podcast, but this is no joke. This is a serious thing that, my podcast, I mean, I'm determined to connect you. As I said, I'm going to connect you to the right person in life who's also doing similar activities. But in the end, this isn't my cup of tea. You know, these are the problems that, IT people like you need to get to the bottom of, so that we're able to run a society safely and ethically on whatever currency the society says.
Yes. Well, as every new technology, right, has a learning curve. So we'll learn how to harness these things, hopefully soon.
Right, right. And so, what about some of the other things that are going on in the country at the moment? There's a lot of new social changes, there's a lot of new philosophical changes. And then, do you really think that most people are still living in the caves? I mean, what do you really think about that? After all, you voiced the video.
Well, that is exactly why I started the podcast. Um, and actually, before starting conversation with you, I was having another conversation with a very good friend of mine, and that's why I'm into philosophy. I mean, most of my background of the podcast has to do with philosophy, spirituality, consciousness, psychology, a lot of science, history of science, civilizations. So I really believe that everything is happening because it must happen. It's like the allegory of the cave has uh, captured certain principles that are universal and timeless at the moment. They have captured something that it's as true as the law of gravitation, right? And
Well,
uh,
what are these principles that the allegory of the cave has captured?
well, that there's some people that are very they don't like to get into the difficulties of life, and the anxiousness of not understanding certain things or acknowledging that they don't understand certain things, or they just get used to understanding life in a certain way, and they don't really want to expand their awareness and their consciousness into other realms, just because at the beginning it's going to be a little bit chaotic, right? Which is um, a lot of like what has been very big with Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you have heard about him.
Oh, I'm not really. Please remind us about that person.
Well, Jordan Peterson, he's a clinical psychologist. He's been on the rise with his popularity, presenting a fresh perspective of a psychological perspective and things that are happening at the moment. Uh, and he actually he's a professor or was a professor in Canada, where I lived probably for a year. Um, I think he's from Alberta. I lived in Vancouver, but anyway, he started becoming very popular because of the whole pronouns things with non-binary people, just like Ben Shapiro. They started talking against, the government making it necessity to, refer to people in certain ways, uh, claiming that they were attacking freedom speech and things of this style. But at the same time, he's very well known for one of his most popular books is 12 Rules for Life. And he talks a lot about, what gives meaning to life and the things that we have to do to mostly get out of the cave, right? He has another book, which is one of my favorites. That's his heavyweight book. It's called Maps of Meaning. And he actually talks the difference in that book. He talks the psychological difference through science and mythology about the difference between people who get out of the cave and people who stay in the cave, and how that has a lot to do with our biology, our brain structures, right? How we process reality, and the beauty and the importance that mythological stories have in our civilization to keep it together and sane and healthy, right?
Sure, sure. So I think it's a very simple answer, but it's a very important answer. Why did we get out of the cave?
Because life is dynamic, it's fluid. It's like I always like to say, you cannot put the infinity in a box. and when everything's always moving, we need to transcend. You know, it's we have the tendency as human beings to become very static, and the thing is that everything, you know, like Buddhism says, everything is always changing. Everything is always different, and we get in the illusion, which in Buddhism they call it Maya, I believe. Uh, right, the illusion that everything's static and not much is changing. And I really believe that that is the reason why we are in most of these issues, because we are failing to change and adapt, right? And we have our evolution, and things have been evolving slowly, you know. Are you acquainted with the boiling frog story?
I am not. Please, if you want, you can tell me a little bit about it.
So this is in philosophy. It's a story that I utilize to say how people get used to static things, and that's how they die. So they usually say, you know, if you want to boil a frog, just put it in cold water and put it in the stove and just raise the temperature, you know, little by little, and the frog is not going to realize it until it's cooked, right? Um, so that's basically what happens to us. You know, we get into all these technological innovations, and we start getting all these fruits from these technological innovations, and we start getting interested into entertainment and just leisure, and we forget about working hard and, you know, really trying to get out of the cave and keep exploring our world, which I believe that's one of the reasons why Elon Musk is so popular and successful at the moment, because he's one of the few people that has gotten out of the cave, right? And he went out, and he just coming back and showing us like all the cool things that you can do when you get out of the cave, because you learned all these valuable things.
Cool. All right, all right. What about I mean that's all very interesting, and I totally understand it. I mean my perception of it is I think we got out of the cave in society historically. I love history, by the way. And I think people got out of the cave because they thought. They thought and they observed and they made observations about their environment, you know. Well, actually, I didn't mention, or I forgot if I did, but French is my second language. I
Hmm.
speak, yeah. It's a bit of a long story. My parents and I speak French, and we go to France a lot as a family. And one of the things I've never done in France is I've never been to Toulouse yet. Now, you would probably know, why would I want to go to Toulouse, or why would you want to go to Toulouse?
Um,
There's something very special in Toulouse that a philosopher would want to know about.
um, would you remind me? I'm blank at the moment.
Sure, it's the cave paintings.
Oh,
Supposedly in Toulouse, you can go to this cave. I strongly doubt they'll take just anyone down. You probably have to, probably have to pay some money, pay off some people to look the other way, but they'll probably let you go down and they'll show you these paintings on the wall of animals and the depiction of these brutal scenes of the day, 30 and 40,000 years ago. And what it really shows is that people have always been connected to the world around us. We've always been aware of things.
yes. Well, you actually brought a very interesting subject, which is, you know, the cognitive revolution for sure.
Right. It's really, yeah, that fascinates me.
Oh,
Like, at what point did people, I mean, I'm sure it happened. See, the thing that I would ask is, I mean, have you studied, and I'm sure you have you studied like the ancient philosophers, like, like Socrates and Plato and those guys?
definitely.
Yeah. What, to your knowledge, what has been the oldest text written about people? Basically, I guess, who was the first historian who wrote a report that we have an understanding of today? That would be my question.
Oh, I don't remember, to be honest, but probably way before that. I have no idea, to be
I
honest.
mean, the reason that is fine, of course. The reason I would ask is I would want to know, if we look at also the other thing that I'm fascinated by, being someone who's bilingual, I'm fascinated by languages. So
Oh yes.
we know that the first written language, or the first evidence of a writing system, was the ancient Mesopotamian and Sumerian. However, we know that people have been speaking far longer than that. That was simply a text that showed orders of wheat and orders of barley, and it showed numbers and mathematical equations of when things needed to be delivered. That was the first example of writing. But and then from that point on, people said days of the week, and then they probably talked about their society of that time, and then they invented days of the week to keep track of things from there. But I'm sure before then people still thought about that, or if they didn't get their barley or their apple on time, it would still occur to them, wait a minute, that's late, I should make a note of that. I wouldn't want to think that people were so primitive in Sumerian times that they weren't able to do that. But what's your perception of it?
Um, I think to go back a little bit, I think that could be a very general statement, because uh, you know, language technology usually changes consciousness. It pushes a little bit more, right? And speech, um, images, right? And then languages, all of those are technologies that we have learned to use a long time. So yeah, I don't really think they were more primitive in that way. I think they used interpreted reality in a very different way. um, I think they were more holistic in the way of perceiving the world, you know and I think that's one of the issues sometimes that can happen with language, that it's so abstract that people can lose themselves in translation. And uh, I think when you said that if we got out of the cave, I say not really very much, because um, I think some people will get out of it, but mainly that's why the allegory of the cave is so uh, real even to this day, right? Because it's just for the people who gain some engagement with learning how to use these technologies. Um, and that's one of the beauties that I really like about systems and learning about systems in an abstract way, right? That it shows you that uh, the distribution is not always general and continuous, but it propagates through certain people and some others not. And that's actually one thing that you see in civilizations, ancient civilizations, like you say, right? um, the stories that they create, like Mesopotamia, and like Jordan Peterson actually talks a lot about the story of Mesopotamia and their gods, and how their gods interact. um, and usually that's what they talk. Are you acquainted with the hero story?
No, I would not be.
So there was this philosopher called Joseph Campbell, who studied most of mythologies of ancient civilization. And he started, as he was going through them and, analyzing them, he started noticing a pattern among all of them. And he realized that all mythologies had a story embedded, right? Which now we know that they're like the archetypes that Carl Jung talks about. And the story, that's why they call them the hero story, because it always talks about, exactly the same person. It talks about the person who got out of the cave. Um, and it is this person that he comes to realize that he doesn't know something about the world. And or he's presented by a chaotic problem like the one that we're going nowadays with our civilization. And for him to find solutions to those chaotic problems, he just leaves home and explores the world to get to his solution. And in the journey, he is presented with different challenges. And once he defeats the biggest challenge, the dragon, right, and he slashes the head off the dragon, then he returns home with new understanding, with a new character, and he brings peace and fruits to their town or wherever he came from, right? So it's quite interesting when you see it in that perspective.
Oh, sure. It's extremely interesting. What is your perception or what is your knowledge of there have been, and I mean, I'm just fascinated. I'm also fascinated by archaeology and, history and things like that. What's your perception on the myth or the story of Atlantis? Most people in society would say it's absolutely a hoax. However, however, I believe that the ancient philosophers mentioned it, and that there could have been even some documentation that proved that there was some economic trading with people from a place called Atlantis. But what is the truth behind that? Do you know?
Well, the truth, it's going to be very hard if you were not there, right? But it's a tricky one. I've entertained myself for some time with those thoughts. For me, I mean, Atlantis was this city, right? That was known. I think Plato or someone like that recorded, Homer recorded it
It
in
was, I believe, yes, I believe when you learn about it that you learn that one of those philosophers, now I don't know which one, but one of the philosophers wrote down that there was some sort of a trade deal or some sort of a economic partnership, and they wrote it down. So, you
well,
know,
like this advanced civilization that was very advanced technologically. It was like heaven and earth. Um, as far as I know, they have found and not found certain things. I think I have seen this from more like National Geographic, TV series that
mhm.
they hunting things from Atlantis and finding out this stuff. But I mean, the truth is that there's a lot of things that we don't know about our ancient civilizations, right? That are very mystical and quite interesting. But I do believe that it could, something like that could have existed. It's I don't see why we know very little about our origins, and we don't. We've known there's been several floods, great floods in Earth, so we don't know to an extent, uh, how truthful those things could be. But it seems like it.
So the answer is who knows?
Who knows? It just it's one of those ideas that you probably never know until like either they find something or you know uh, but it's sometimes it's fun just to entertain yourself with you know
Well, yeah, but to an extent, but then we'll no matter how long we entertain ourselves, we'll never know.
yeah, right.
So,
That's why I try to stay with things that I know.
right, right. It's kind
But
of one of those mysteries where we will never truly get to the bottom. But maybe in our lifetime we will figure that out. I would like to think. I mean, to me there are far greater mysteries that I want the answer to. But knowing the truth about that one way or the other, that wouldn't be a bad idea, and it would be pretty interesting. And it's possible. It's all possible. It's also possible that it was always a myth that has been passed on through thousands of years. Who knows?
right.
Um, now, what is your philosophy? I have to really put us more into, I guess, the future here. So there's been a lot of talk about the future colonization of the universe. Even this year we developed the United States Space Force. So, how do you feel about the colonization of Mars and in that in our future? What do you think will come of that?
I think it's the most eloquent thing that we could hold right now as a goal for sure. Um, I think uh, I think that we need to expand into that vision for sure. Uh, you know, Jordan Peterson talks a lot about how it's very important for us to set ourselves goals that are very difficult, and while chasing those very almost unrealistic goals, it it changes and evolves our character and our persona, right? And I think that's one of the things that we need to set ourselves, because we are too entertained with a lot of problems, a lot of things that we're not going to solve uh, with the same way of thinking that we created them with, you know? Um, so I think that the support has to be there, but I think that we, more than anything, there has to be an ecosystem around, going to Mars. I think that we're going into a transition where the whole structure of our economies, global economy, it's changing into a global economy, right? And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we have nowadays, that people want to keep driving our economy the way how we have driven our economy for the last decades, and that is just not possible because a lot has changed. And um, there's these guys. I don't know if you know about Eric Weinstein and Peter Thiel. They talk a lot about how our economy has been stagnated for, I think, like a decade, or probably like 20 years ago. I don't remember quite well. But there's another guy who I really like a lot, whose name is Jeremy Rifkin. Have you heard about him before?
No, the vast majority of these people I would not have heard, because as is apparent to you, I did not study philosophy.
Oh,
So I right, I never studied philosophy, right? I studied international relations, right?
well, Eric Weinstein is it's a hedge fund manager for Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel is an investor, one of the biggest investors or first investors for Facebook. So they're very much in the technology sector.
Okay, but see, I wouldn't necessarily know. I mean, now that you're saying that, yeah, that makes sense, but I wouldn't necessarily follow them.
And
Um,
Jeremy Rifkin, he's an economist. He actually advises Germany and China and European Union on their investments for technological revolutions to accelerate their economies and make them a little bit more productive. I also use you to do some research on him, because he has very interesting stuff, very good material. He actually talks about too as well about um, how technology shifts consciousness, and he's actually one of the builders of the new Green Deal with
mhm.
the, I believe, and
Sure, sure.
behind his claims are very interesting, and that's why I tell you I believe that most of the issues that we're going nowadays with the country and even global matters, we have to, because we're going through a massive shift of consciousness because of the technology that we have, especially the internet, computers, right? And because of the last product of Steve Jobs, which was the iPhone, the smartphone. Uh, like he said, the computer is a bicycle for the mind. So, being
Yeah.
able to have a device where we can mirror our intellect and have instant communication, uh, it is actually pushing us to change our consciousness, because we are becoming aware of issues and that otherwise would have been very difficult to get informed about.
Well, yes, you're 100% correct. It's interesting that the computer is considered to be the bicycle of the mind, as you said. Jobs said, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that he said it. I didn't know he did say that, but that wouldn't surprise me. The difference, though, is that when you're riding a bicycle, it's something that's benefiting your physical health, right? Your cardiovascular health, your muscle strength, things like that. And I mean, if you're, listening to great podcasts, you're learning stuff. But there's a lot of negative stuff on the internet, and a lot of stuff that we aren't really benefiting from. So I mean, it's kind of a cool thing to say, the computer, an iMac is the bicycle of the mind, but it depends on how I use it, right? If I use
Exactly.
it to, if we use it to educate people, which if I'm not doing this, I'm a teacher. So if I'm using it to educate people or create these videos for the world, then maybe it's good, but who knows? I mean, the only person that I know who thinks these videos are good are me, because these are my opinions. That's why the channel says right there in the channel, Aaron's opinion. It doesn't mean that anything we're saying are Aaron's facts. None of this this is not a factual conversation. We're giving out our opinions, right? This is just an opinion talk. So really, you've given a lot of facts. I appreciate it and recognize it. And at the same time, people could look at this video and say, well, that's just someone's opinion. Why should I listen at all?
Yeah.
But it's incredibly interesting. And so, really, and I do not disagree with you. We certainly are transitioning to something. I
Well,
guess where are we? Where is our consciousness going? Hmm.
uh, probably you always say just expanding, becoming aware of things that we were doing before that are not fruitful if we continue that way. I think it's going to rearrange our social organization, right? Just like you saw it in the French Revolution, right? I mean, you've been there, so probably have some acquaintance with the story. But you have new technologies, you have new sources of energies, new sources of communication. You have like the printing press, things of this style, and ideas move fast, right? And that's what happened with the printing press, and it helped for people to organize, right? We talked about language, that's another technology, printing press. So you start having all these revolutions in communication and in expansion. What happens is that it gives us the tools to better manage ourselves. And when we get those tools and better manage ourselves, then we can be more productive, right? Um, so you mentioned a great thing, which was how do we use the things that we have, and that is, I think, where most of our shift of consciousness has to transcend into, which is what I do with the things that I have, right? Because most of the issues that you see nowadays, for example, gun control, has been a big issue. And it's the issue, it's not the gun, the issue is the intention of the person, the issue is the consciousness of the person, right? And we all of us are responsible to keep each other in check and help us sane and healthy, so that consciousness doesn't go to bad ways, and people want to use it for bad things. So our consciousness has to, more than expand, go inward and saying, what is it that I do every day, and is it useful or not, and am I doing the right things or not to transcend and become a better person and be a better person, not only for myself but for the people that surround me, and for my city, and for my state, and for my country, and for the world, right? Because that is one of the beauties that you learn through systems, right? Which is in the network effect, and how fast things can propagate when there's a little twitch in something, right? We call this chaos theory. And chaos theory talks about, otherwise the people know it more in the popular way, like the butterfly effect. And it talks about how the flap of the wing of a butterfly on one side of the world can cause, a hurricane or a tornado in the other side of the world. So you never know what little intentionality can flick the world and incline the world to either chaos and order, right? So I think that's where our consciousness must shift, which is inwardly and outwardly, you know, both ways. Because that's one thing that it's happening to us right now. You know, we're just uh, driving ourselves crazy without really listening to each other, and that's because uh, you know, coming from computer science perspective, we're very much like processing machines, and for a processing machine to process information, you need software, right? So it needs instructions of how to execute a task. And philosophy, you know, the pursuit of philosophy and science, understanding things like religion and all these things, gives us all those instructions, right? What are the things that we ought to do or not to do, we should not do, because eventually, you know, they can turn us into the bad side or into chaos or into order. So for that, it requires exactly what the allegory of the cave was talking about, which is a little bit of struggle to get out in the world and discover something that you haven't discovered before. Not get yourself into in a comfort zone, right? Of doing the same thing over and over. Go out, explore, and fail, learn, have fun, but be serious at the same time. And we have gotten so involved into a lot of our culture narrative that we believe that a lot of things are okay, you know? I mean, just look at, you know, popular music, uh, the things that they say, you know, how people act, you know, everything is about, sorry for the word, but bitches and hoes, you know, and money and let's go out there and let's kill people. Like we've gotten too crazy about a lot of things, and we are not being very considerate about, you know, should I continue behaving the way I should behave, or should I probably reconsider and and see what I can do useful for us? Because now everyone, or I don't want to say everyone, you know, but mostly people are going after instant gratification, right? That's one of the biggest things that people are talking with social media, Instagram, Facebook. People are going and doing, you know, things that can affect the psyche of any other human being, with likes and hearts. And if we don't learn how to use these technologies, which require instructions and consideration, they're going to tear up the fabric of society. And right now we are in scales that if it turns up, there's going to be a lot of chaos out there, right? So that's one of the reasons too, like why I started the podcast, because, you know, like other people are out there talking and trying to bring order to our chaos. We need to be acquainted with these instructions and stories that our civilization hasn't retained for so many years, you know, um, and just because of those things, we have gotten where we are right now, and we can live better than kings lived 200 years ago, you know. But that brings a lot of responsibility, and you know, being that irresponsible sometimes, and it's not only bringing us into chaos, but it's bringing our world into chaos, which that's one of the other biggest problems that we have nowadays, right? Which is global warming, uh, pollution, and people that lives, you know, like here in the United States, that are in first world country, that have the power to really influence the world, you know. uh, Usually they are more entertained with just having fun, just living their life, you know, going out, work, uh, go to a restaurant, have fun with friends, take some selfies, and do all over again, right? Without really pushing uh, the boundaries of what we know and where we can go. And that's why Elon Musk is such an inspiration for a lot of people nowadays, right? And that's why we have to entertain those inspirations, because it is the things that makes us wonder, that makes us do the impossible things. What do you think about that?
I think for one thing, I am so glad that you're now on the Aaron's opinion community, because the level of brilliance that you have and the level of observation that you have is just magnificent. I couldn't have come up with that answer, and I have a college degree. so, so for someone who by the way, so for someone who said that they dropped out of college, I never would have noticed. You didn't even need to tell me. I would have thought you had a master's degree.
Well,
But you must be you're a very kind and very humble person, and that's the type of person that I want on my team here at Aaron's Opinion. So I am starting to run out of time. I love my schedules. I'm coming up to a time where I have to, eat a snack and drink a cup of coffee and watch TV and stuff like that. But of course, before I do, but of course, before I do, I always give my guests this. If guests love this, if you can ask me only one question and really make me sweat, really put me on the spot, what question do you want to ask me?
really put you on the spot. I don't know, man. I'm not this kind of people that like to put people in the spot. But I don't know. You said that you have a lot of questions, big questions. So I actually wonder, what would be one of them? What is one of the things that usually your mind goes a lot towards?
Yeah.
I think I'll be curious to know.
Let me just sum it up by saying that Samuel Clemens, to whom I'm sure you know, said something very important. He said many things, but one of my famous quotes that I love from Samuel Clemens, and this is the one thing I think about, not every day, but every once in a blue moon, I might think, and especially anytime that I'm thinking about it every once in a while, I might think of it, that there are only 2 days of my life that are important: the day I was born, the day I find out why.
Right.
But that's a deep one, though. That's a deep question.
Yeah.
So basically, the question that we all need to solve is, why are we here? And to that, I thank you very, 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 very much. Here, let's end this episode. I'll talk to you for another 30 seconds about something else. Well, guys, this has been definitely. Well, we did have a historian on the podcast. You would love to go back to that. You would love that episode. We did have a historian come in and talk to us on this podcast before, and we've had everyone now. Now we have a philosopher on our staff here. So I greatly, greatly appreciate that. That was an action-packed episode of Aaron's Opinion where we talked about philosophy. And as you could tell, I didn't study philosophy. But thank you for teaching me. And thank you for teaching the audience of Aaron's Opinion. You're an amazing teacher. And I want to say that I wish the world very, very good health. I wish you very good health, David. And we have a slogan here at the podcast. I came up with it myself. So I say, help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.